Okay, I know I don't normally make book reviews, and this isn't really a review per se. It's just something I need to scream about into the void, you know? That's usually the motive for most of my videos, needing to scream into the void. So I somewhat knew what I was getting into when I decided to listen to the audiobook of The Metamorphosis, beautifully narrated by Sherlock Holmes himself, or I guess in more relevant times, Dr. Strange. I listened to perhaps the weirdest book I will ever listen to or read, but again, I kinda knew going into it. Some things, though, I just wasn't prepared for. Spoilers, as usual. I'll link the audiobook in the description. It's on YouTube, and it's not very long, so... Now, I don't know if any of my thoughts here are gonna be coherent, but let's get into it. Also, these are 3 fan art pieces for Killjoy's Danger Days MCR stuff. Sorry I'm not drawing a giant cockroach for this video. I think I'd throw up. I honestly don't know how I feel about these. Sometimes I like them, sometimes I hate them. I do think the color schemes at the end look cool when they're finished, so there's that. Anyway, first things first, I knew he was going to turn into a bug. That's what the book is about. But when I heard he turned into a bug, I assumed he would be like a normal-sized bug. No, he's a giant, human-sized cockroach. Nightmare fuel. Cockroaches are easily one of the most disgusting bugs out there. No offense. I'm actually getting a little nauseous thinking about them. And here we have a human-sized one. I'm gonna vom. So he just wakes up as a giant bug. And honestly, I found the descriptions for how he moved to be very frustrating, but in a good way. I felt the frustration of his difficulty moving, you know? He doesn't seem freaked, though, that he's a giant bug. He's just thinking about his job, which he hates, but he, as a bug, is thinking about his job. Capitalism for the win. His boss is literally outside his locked door yelling at him to come out and be careful what you wish for, I guess, because here comes Gregor, a giant fucking cockroach. So his boss is like, bye, and his family is like, WTF. So Gregor is a giant bug. He can't really talk or communicate. He spoke a few sentences right at the beginning and then lost that ability. And throughout the story, the less human interaction he has, the more bug-like his mind becomes. He still has like human thoughts, but he also is losing his mind to a cockroach mind. When he heard his mother for the first time in a long time, it brings him out of his bug thoughts for a moment and reminds him of his human life, which his family doesn't know that, so they just continue to keep him locked away in his room, which I guess is understandable to an extent because he is, after all, a giant cockroach. I do have to wonder, had his family interacted with him more, would this have changed anything? I was thinking about like when people are in comas, right? Their friends and family will sit with them and talk to them or read to them, even though they can't respond, but it helps them. Gregor's interactions with his family is very limited, even more because they think he's not Gregor anymore. They think he's just a giant cockroach, which is fair. There are a few times that he tries to communicate with his family and they just freak out and assume the worst. The first example of this is when his sister and mother are moving the furniture out of his room so he can crawl easier, and he escapes the room essentially. And when his father gets home, Gregor heads towards his bedroom door to show that he is cooperating and that he means no harm, but his father just assumes the worst and throws a ton of apples at him. One of the apples stays lodged in his back, I believe, and causes an infection. How hard did his dad throw that apple? Holy, he chucked that thing for it to get stuck in his back. Oh my gosh. The second example is when his sister, Greta, is playing the violin. He comes out of his room and moves near her despite the people in their home that don't know that he lives there. But he wants her to come into his room and play because he was appreciating the music and the other people weren't. This time, they do understand that he means no harm, but he never got to communicate what he actually wanted. This scene, though, brings me to the first reason why this book makes me want to scream into the void. And yeah, it's a good thing that Gregor couldn't communicate what he was thinking, because Gregor is attracted to his sister sexually. Yep, he sure is. I want to die. Kafka, what are you, what? I can't even form sentences. What were you thinking, dude? My guy, I know this is supposed to be weird, but come on. He and Greta had been close before his transformation, and she took it upon herself to be his caretaker after his transformation. Parents are unhelpful, to say the least. His mother just kind of hides and his dad is angry all the time. Greta becomes his caretaker, and I guess this causes a shift in their relationship, both good and bad, I guess, because he often gets frustrated with her because she does things he doesn't want her to, like she brings the wrong food, or she leaves dirt on the floor, or takes all the furniture out of his room. But she's his caretaker, and she's better than both of their parents. So I found this like paragraph, I don't even know what website this is, but this paragraph this guy wrote arguing that it's the Oedipus complex from everybody's favorite psychology creep, Freud. He argues that because Greta is his caretaker, she becomes a mother-like figure to him, and as we all know, every dude is attracted to their mother. Oh my gosh. I feel like because of Gregor's sexual repression, which is mentioned briefly via a framed picture of like a, I don't know, halfway nude lady on his wall, and his sister being essentially the only woman in his life, and a caretaker at that, that's why he had some sexual desires about his sister. Also, he's a bug, so there's that. But I feel like we can leave Freud out of this. He wasn't right about the Oedipus complex, okay? Obviously. He was just a creep. So we don't need to reference this as if it's an actual thing. But maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. I don't even know why we're trying to rationalize it, because it is incest, and there's no rationalizing incest. I don't care what you say. He had sexual thoughts about his sister. Gregor, you creep. I get that you're a bug, but you still have a human mind. Get it out of the gutter, you freak. Now, this brings me to the other thing that made me want to scream into the void. The ending. Gregor dies, and honestly, I'm surprised it took him that long to die, considering he ate next to nothing for his entire bug lifetime, but his death is due to lack of will to live, starvation, and an infection from the wound he got from his father throwing apples at him. So by lost the will to live, leading up to his death, his family had stopped pretty much taking care of him, and right before he died, they were trying to figure out how to get rid of him. And so, when he dies, they're sad, but then they start discussing how convenient it is. Like, now they're gonna get a smaller apartment and go on outings and walks together. Like, bro, your child died. I understand caretaker burnout, and you had an enormous cockroach living in your home, and that's a lot to deal with, but still, mourn for at least a day. They didn't even bother giving him a funeral. I assume he's in his 20s, so that's at least 20 years he was your human child. And he worked to pay off your debts while he could, too. He and his sister were close before he became a cockroach. And then when he dies, they just forget all about his previous human life because now it's so much more convenient. I mean, okay, to be fair, they believed that he was no longer Gregor, so I don't know if I'm saying that. I feel like I'm saying Gregor wrong, but anyway. So I guess they probably already mourned him, but still. I don't know. Also, when the parents and sister go on a walk at the end, the parents notice how voluptuous their daughter is. Yeah, they use the word voluptuous. Kill me. They start thinking about how she's gonna need a husband soon. Oh my gosh, Vom. It's interesting. It goes from Gregor taking care of his family, even though he hates his job, he has to stay and help pay off their debts, and then he becomes the one who needs caring for, and his family at a certain point just give up. Literally, before he died, they were looking to get rid of him. Now, yeah, sure, taking care of your parents is a bit different than taking care of a giant cockroach child, but still. That's kind of the point of the book, though, the burden of responsibility. Gregor wanted to be freed of his responsibilities, but when he started to feel like a burden on his family. I mean, Greta certainly felt the burden of responsibility taking care of him. And all throughout the book, Gregor's thoughts are outrage because he's not taken care of well enough, and he feels like but also he feels like a burden, and he feels bad because he's not helping his family anymore. So this might be weird, but I just want to say, being disabled, I think there's an interesting, harsh, painful familiarity here. Feeling like a burden on your family even though it's out of your control, being isolated and not heard by the people around you, and the pressure of I need to work even when you can't. It's all very familiar. I'm not saying that this is the disabled representation we need, and I know comparing being disabled to being a giant cockroach is probably really offensive. I'm offended myself. But I just think it's an interesting angle to look at this book from, right? I don't know. Again, maybe I'm wrong. I just feel like, to me, in my experience in being disabled, it's a little familiar, especially the guilt of feeling like a burden on your family. Some of the main themes of this book are feeling like a burden, isolation, and sacrifice. And I think those are pretty relatable to my experience in being disabled. Now, not a cockroach, thank God, but, There's also the burden of responsibility and a critique of capitalism and how dehumanizing and alienating it can be. Which, yeah, this book takes place long before the internet, long before cars even, but there's still that pressure to constantly be working, even as a bug, which sounds ridiculous. That sentence is ridiculous, but Gregor also worries about how he can't take care of his parents, even though Greta pretty much has assumed the role once Gregor, turned into a cockroach. I almost said turned into a vampire. That would be a very different book. This book is quite the onion, if I'm being honest. Anyway, tell me your thoughts on Metamorphosis. Did you like it, or were you too freaked out at the thought of an enormous cockroach, or both? Thank you so much for watching. I will see y'all later.